Many are grieving the loss of an entire family in the River Oaks area after Houston police say a man fatally shot his two young children and wife before then killing himself.
The couple own two popular Montrose restaurants.
Jason Miles is live outside the family's home on Kingston Street after speaking with both friends and neighbors. Jason.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, around this time yesterday, police were stringing yellow crime scene tape across this street behind me after officers found 4 bodies inside that townhome.
2 teddy bears, some flowers, and a note now sit in the entryway to what was the home of a loving family from all outward appearances. Police say officers were called to the family's home for a wellness check around 5:30 Monday evening after getting concerned calls from a babysitter and relative. Police believe Mr. Mitchell fatally shot his wife and children, ages 4 and 8, before turning the gun on himself. We've seen a number of people drive or walk by the home this afternoon, including neighbors who wanted to leave these mementos.
Well, I personally know what it is to suffer a traumatic loss. I can't imagine what the family is going through. And although we didn't know them personally, I just think the family needs to be loved on.
And some more friends came by just a short time ago. They were gathered here in the driveway. Some of them, you could hear them crying, a very emotional scene. Meantime, T. Mitchell's sister posted on Facebook just within the last few hours that this is a heartbreaking situation. As you might imagine, the family asking for privacy at this point. And I should tell you, according to court records at least, there have been no prior domestic or other issues at this address, at least nothing on the record. Reporting live from the River Oaks area, Jason Miles, KHOU.
She went to pick up the kids from school. That was the whole plan for that Monday afternoon. A babysitter pulling up to a Houston school, waiting at the gate, watching the doors, looking for 2 familiar faces. An 8-year-old girl named Maya, a 4-year-old boy named Max. They never came out. She waited, she checked the time. She watched other children pour through those doors and scatter toward waiting cars, waiting parents, waiting arms. Max and Maya were not among them, so she did what anyone would do. She called the house. No answer. She called again. She tried the mother's phone. She tried the father's phone. The calls rang out and went nowhere. It had been more than 24 hours since anyone had heard from this family. She reached out to the family, and the family called 911. Houston Police Department responded to a welfare check on the evening of Monday, May 4th, 2026, at a home on Kingston Street in River Oaks, one of the most established, most affluent neighborhoods in the entire city of Houston. The kind of address that carries weight. The kind of street where the properties are worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Officers approached a 4-bedroom home valued at over $1 million. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it should, and then they went inside. What law enforcement found inside that home set off a wave of shock that moved through Houston's restaurant community, its hospitality industry, and eventually reached national headlines. 4 members of the same family, the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, would later confirm the official findings for all 4 individuals. Within 24 hours, Houston Police Department named a suspect. It was not an outsider. It was not a stranger. It was not someone who had forced their way in from the outside. The suspect had never left the house. What makes this case cut deeper than most is not just what happened. It is who these people were. Because this family was not living a quiet or invisible life. They were known. They were celebrated. They had built something real, something thousands of people in Houston interacted with on a regular basis. They had been featured on national television. They had been named the best in their industry. They were actively planning their next chapter. Meetings scheduled, menus being designed, a future that looked, from every visible angle, like it was only getting started. And there was not a single official record, not one police call, not one court filing, not one documented warning that pointed to what was coming. That is what makes this case so hard to process. Not just the loss, but the silence that surrounded it. My name is your host, and this is Lethal Obsession, the channel that does not move on until the full story has been told. If that is what you came here for, make sure you are subscribed before this documentary is over. Today we are covering the case of Thy Mai, a first-generation Vietnamese American, a business owner, a board member, a fashion designer, a mother of 2, and the investigation that followed the events of May 4th, 2026, at 21 Kingston Street in Houston, Texas. Everything you are about to hear is drawn from verified law enforcement statements. official medical examiner records, confirmed reporting from credible news organizations, and the family's own public statement. Where information is unconfirmed, we will tell you directly. Where the public record ends, we will tell you that too, because Thy Mai deserves accuracy. Her children deserve accuracy, and you deserve the complete picture. Not the version rushed out in the first 48 hours. Not the version loaded with details the family has since confirmed were never true. Most people who covered this case got several key facts wrong. By the end of this documentary, you will know exactly which ones and why it matters. Stay with us. Before we get to what happened on Kingston Street, you need to know who Thy Mai was. Not the headline version. Not the two-sentence biography that got copy-pasted across every news article in the first 48 hours. The real version, because the only way this case lands with the weight it deserves is if you understand exactly who was in that house. Thy Mai was 39 years old. She was born in Chicago. She was raised in Houston. And from the very beginning, her life was built around two things: family and food. She grew up as a first-generation Vietnamese American in a household where the restaurant was not just a business, it was the center of everything. Her grandmother and her mother ran a small traditional Vietnamese restaurant in Houston, and from the time Thy was old enough to carry a plate, she was part of it. She has spoken about this herself. Her exact words: customers were probably wondering why this 12-year-old was a food runner. She worked the front of house. She learned the cash register. On the nights her mother could not leave and they could not go home, there were beds in the back of the restaurant where Thy would sleep. That was her childhood, not watching from the sidelines, fully inside it, from the age of 12. That upbringing gave her something most people spend years trying to learn. She understood real hospitality from the inside out, before she had a single business card or a single credential to her name. When it came time for college, Thy enrolled at the University of Houston, where she studied consumer science and merchandising. She was working at the same time, not at an entry-level counter job, but at Tootsie's and Tiffany & Company, two of the higher-end retail operations in the city. She was already learning the business of presentation, of customer experience, of what it means to sell something people do not just want but feel something about. It was on the University of Houston campus that a target recruiter approached her. She was not looking for that opportunity, but they connected, and she listened, and she joined Target's management program straight out of graduation. At a young age, she was overseeing more than 50 employees in a high-revenue environment. That is not a minor achievement. That is a woman who could walk into any room, read it immediately, and lead it. She did not stop there. While working full-time, Thy pursued her master's degree in human resources and employment relations from Penn State University. She completed it. Then she went to work at the level her credentials earned her. HR leadership roles at 3 separate Fortune 500 companies in the hospitality and retail industries. 3 companies, not one. She built that career methodically, one position at a time. In some of the most demanding corporate environments in the country, she was the kind of woman who made everything she touched look manageable, which is exactly why nobody around her saw what May 4th was going to take from her. And at the time of her death, she was still in school. She was actively pursuing her MBA at Rice University's Jesse H. Jones School of Management, running 2 restaurants, managing a fashion brand, sitting on an industry board, raising 2 children, and still enrolled, still pushing, still building. Nobody watching her operate in that world had any reason to believe her story would end the way it did. That detail alone tells you who Thy Mai was. She was also a visible and respected presence in Houston's restaurant world. She served on the board of the Texas Restaurant Association's Greater Houston chapter. Craig Howard, the president of that chapter, has spoken publicly about how she joined the board. He did not say she applied. He said they went to her. His words: "We saw such a bright star with Thy that we asked her to serve on our board. We knew she would inject some new ideas." In 2025, her peers in the Houston restaurant industry named her Restaurateur of the Year. That title was not handed down by a committee. It was chosen by the people who worked alongside her, competed in the same space, and watched how she operated every single day. They chose her. Outside of her career, Thy was the creative force behind Foreign Fare, a travel-inspired women's clothing line she launched in 2023. The idea came directly from her own life. She traveled constantly, a woman who was always moving, always building, always 5 steps ahead. 10 days before May 4th, 2026, Thy posted a video on Instagram. She was joking with her husband about getting older. It was light-hearted, ordinary, the kind of content that fills up a feed and disappears into the scroll. Nobody watching it that day had any reason to think it would be the last public video of them together. 3 days before she died, Thy took her 8-year-old daughter Maya shopping for dresses. The occasion was her sister Lai Mai's upcoming wedding in Boston. Thy posted about it. Maya picked her dress. Thy made sure she had hers too. It was a Thursday afternoon. A mother and her daughter, planning for a celebration that was still weeks away. The people around her that week described someone who was fully present, actively engaged, and moving forward on every front. What the following Monday would reveal changed every memory of that week permanently. Now we turn to the other side of this story. Matthew Mitchell was 52 years old. And if Thy Mai's life followed a clear upward line, a woman who knew exactly where she was going and moved toward it with purpose, then Matthew's life looked completely different. It was a series of full reinventions. A man who kept starting over, kept changing direction, kept building something new. On paper, it looked like range and ambition. In hindsight, it raised his questions that nobody around him thought to ask while he was alive. He was not from Houston originally. His path to that city, to that house on Kingston Street, to that restaurant on Montrose, it was not direct by any measure. Matthew graduated from Emory University with a bachelor's degree. From there, he did not enter a career. He went to Europe. He studied in France. He studied in Italy. He spent time at Oxford University in England. He was absorbing the world, its cultures, its food, its history, its rhythm. That kind of education does not appear on a standard resume, but it shapes a person in ways a single classroom cannot. After Europe, he did not come home. He kept moving. He built a career as a journalist and writer, working in London, then Paris, then New York City, 3 of the most demanding media markets in the world. At some point, he decided to come back to Texas. When Matthew returned, he enrolled at Rice University's Jesse H. Jones School of Management. He was not a young graduate figuring out his first career move. He was a man who had already lived across multiple continents, making a deliberate decision to pivot into the business world. After Rice, he entered the pharmaceutical industry. And this is where his career reached a scale that most people in his orbit may not have fully appreciated. He did not start at the bottom and grind upward over decades. He rose. He eventually became the president and CEO of the Texas Center for Drug Development, Inc., a clinical research organization. His father, Dr. Jerry Mitchell, was a professor at Baylor College of Medicine and had previously served as CEO and president of that same company. This was not a random career move. There was family history, professional legacy, and real institutional responsibility attached to that position. He stayed in the pharmaceutical industry for 14 years. 14 years is not a detour, that is a full career. And then he made a decision that genuinely surprised people. He walked away from it entirely. What is worth pausing on, before we get to what came next, is the picture that career history paints of how Matthew Mitchell operated as a person. This was a man who moved through the world with complete internal control. He chose when to stay and when to leave. He chose when to build and when to start over. He kept his entire personal life off social media in an era when that was almost conspicuous. He named the cocktails on his restaurant menus, but gave almost nothing else of his interior world to anyone outside that house. The people who worked with him professionally described a man who was engaged, capable, and present, but who kept a clear boundary between what he showed the world and whatever existed behind it. In the context of what happened on May 4th, 2026, that boundary is the detail that stays with you longest. At an age when most professionals are consolidating what they have built, Matthew Mitchell enrolled in culinary school. He attended the International Culinary School at the Art Institute of Houston and earned an Associate of Applied Science in Culinary Arts. This was not casual. He went through a formal culinary program, earned the credential, and then went to work inside several well-known Houston restaurants before ever opening one of his own. He wanted to understand the industry from the ground level before putting his name above a door. A man with that level of self-discipline, that degree of forward planning, that consistent ability to build and rebuild, Nobody in his circle saw what was coming. That is the detail this case keeps returning to. There are details about Matthew that I spoke about publicly, and they paint a picture of a man who existed somewhat outside the normal frame of modern life. He had no social media presence, not a single account. In an era where personal branding is almost expected, Matthew Mitchell was entirely offline. Thy spoke about this openly. When they first met, the complete absence of any social media made her question who she was actually dealing with. She thought he was either hiding something or not who he said he was. That was how she told the story. But it was not a joke, it was just who he was. He preferred books to screens. He preferred newspapers to feeds. He named every single cocktail on the menus at both of his restaurants, a detail that sounds small until you consider what it means. Those menus were a creative output, a fingerprint, one of the few places where something of Matthew's private interior world made it in front of other people. He was a former scuba diving instructor, a bike messenger, a man who had moved through the world in ways that followed no predictable sequence. Journalist, pharmaceutical CEO, trained chef, restaurateur, and who had built a life that, from every external angle, looked complete and intentional. And that is precisely where this story becomes difficult to sit with. Because when investigators later reviewed the official record surrounding Matthew Mitchell, the documented history, the paper trail that exists for most adults, there was nothing there. No prior police calls to the residence, no court filings of any kind, no documented incidents in Harris County, not one official flag of any kind. There was one account, unverified, not confirmed by law enforcement, not confirmed by the family, from sources close to the case suggesting Matthew had been experiencing episodes of paranoia in the days before May 4, 2026. That account has never been officially substantiated. It remains one unconfirmed thread in a case where the official record remains open. What the confirmed record shows is a man who, on the surface, had built exactly the kind of life people work years to reach. A respected business, a celebrated partnership, 2 children, a home in one of Houston's most established neighborhoods, an industry that had just named his family the best of the best, and not one person in his circle, not a colleague, not a close friend, not a neighbor, has come forward to say they saw any of it coming. That is the part of this case that does not leave you, not because it is unique to Matthew Mitchell, but because it is far more common than most people are willing to accept. What those final days inside that household actually looked like, what was said, what was felt, what the security cameras recorded, is something only the ongoing HPD investigation currently holds. And that investigation has not finished telling its story yet. To understand the full weight of what happened on May 4, 2026, you have to understand what Thy Mai and Matthew Mitchell had built together. Not just the restaurants, not just the awards, the whole picture. How they found each other, how they built a life, and how visible and celebrated that life had become in the years leading up to that Monday evening. They met in 2010 through a mutual friend. By every account, it was not an instant, obvious connection. Thy has spoken publicly about the fact that Matthew's complete absence from social media gave her pause. This was 2010. Social media was already the standard way people presented themselves to the world, and Matthew had none of it. No profiles, no presence, nothing to look up, nothing to verify. She said directly that she was not sure what to make of him at first. The joke between them was that he seemed like someone with something to hide. The reality was that he was simply a man who had no interest in performing his life for an audience. Their first unofficial outing together was at House of Pies in Houston. 2 a.m., the kind of hour when people let their guard down and you find out who someone actually is. Thy ordered chicken fried steak. Matthew did not comment on it. He later admitted he had quietly judged the choice. That detail has been shared publicly. And it matters because it is the kind of specific human moment that tells you more about a relationship than any formal description can. Their first official date was at Backstreet Cafe. The moment Thy has cited as the real turning point came when Matthew attended a gathering with her Vietnamese family. It was a large family event, built around food, the kind of setting that can feel like a test for someone walking in from the outside. Matthew did not hesitate. He sat down, went all in on the Vietnamese food, no reservations, no discomfort. For Thy, that was the moment that settled it. A man who had spent years moving through different countries, who had studied and worked across Europe, who had eaten his way through cultures most people only read about. He was completely at ease at her family's table. That told her what she needed to know. They married in Puerto Vallarta by the sea. They celebrated their 10th anniversary in St. Kitts. Thy posted about it. Her exact words were, "How can it be a decade later, and it still feels like the beginning?" Friends who knew them at the time would later describe that period as one where the couple seemed, by every visible measure, to be exactly where they had always been headed. Together they had 2 children, Maya Mitchell, who was 8 years old, and Maxwell Mitchell, Max, who was 4. In 2019, they opened Traveler's Table in Houston's Montrose district. The concept came directly from who they were as a couple. They had traveled to Morocco, France, and across multiple countries, not as tourists but as people doing deliberate research, eating, observing, learning what made the food of each place specific to that culture. The restaurant was built on that foundation, globally curated cuisine, served in an environment that felt intentional without being out of reach. It was Matthew who first proposed opening the restaurant. Thy has been candid about the fact that she was initially hesitant. She had grown up inside the restaurant industry and understood the workload, the margins, the daily pressure better than most. She came on board because the opportunity to combine everything they were both committed to, food, travel, hospitality, and business, was one she could not walk away from. Traveler's Table found its audience quickly. In 2021, the restaurant was featured on Guy Fieri's Food Network show Diners, Drive-Ins and Dives. Matthew and Thy were photographed with Fieri at the restaurant. For a Houston dining establishment only 2 years into operation, that national visibility carried real weight. By 2025, Traveler's Table had reached number 2 on Yelp's list of top places to eat in all of Houston. In 2023, Thy and Matthew launched Foreign Fare, a travel-inspired women's clothing line. The launch event was held in Traveler's Table. It was not a simple product release. They staged a full fashion show inside their own restaurant. Attendees could try on pieces in a pop-up dressing room set up within the dining space. The food served that evening included Nigerian suya skewers and Japanese kaki fried oysters. The cocktails were named the Happy Wife, Happy Life, and the Foreign Correspondent. The entire event was a precise reflection of who they were as a couple. Food, travel, design, and a sense of occasion all brought together into a single evening. Thy spoke to Paper City magazine in 2023 about the clothing line. She said, "It's what shaped both of our lives and careers." She was talking about travel, but it applied equally to the marriage itself. In 2024, they opened Traveler's Cart, also on Montrose Boulevard. It was the more accessible complement to Traveler's Table, a global street food concept serving everything from tacos to steak frites to chicken parmesan. Where Traveler's Table was built for an occasion, Traveler's Cart was built for a Tuesday. Both restaurants operated under their hospitality company, Travelers Collective, which had secured a $2.35 million funding round to support the expansion. In 2025, the Greater Houston Restaurant Association named Thy and Matthew their Restaurateurs of the Year. That same year, they were actively working with colleagues to develop a new menu specifically around the World Cup. There were planning meetings. There were decisions being made. There was the kind of forward momentum that only comes from a business that is not maintaining, but actively growing. Thy told the Houston Chronicle in 2024, "We didn't always speak the language of places we traveled to, but we always had food in common." People who knew them well have said that, quote, applied to more than just the restaurants. Food was the thread that ran through everything. How they met, how they traveled, how they built their business, how they raised their children, and how they showed up in the Houston community year after year. In the spring of 2026, this looked like a family at the top of everything they had worked toward. 2 successful restaurants, a growing fashion brand, national recognition, industry awards, 2 children, a 10-year marriage, active plans for the months ahead. Not one person in their circle had any indication of what May 4th, 2026 was about to bring. But the final week of April had already started. And looking back at what that week contained, what was posted, what was planned, what was missed, the timeline tells a story that nobody was reading in real time. If you are watching this and you have not yet subscribed to Lethal Obsession, right now is the time. you have heard so far is only the foundation. The details that most channels never covered. The records that contradict what went viral in the first 48 hours and the official findings that have never been fully laid out in one place. That is what is coming. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single part of this case. Now let us get back to it. By the spring of 2026, the Mitchell family's life looked, from every external angle, like it was in full motion. The restaurants were running. The fashion line was growing. Industry recognition was still fresh. The people closest to them had no reason to think anything was wrong. Then came the last week. On April 24th, 2026, 10 days before officers responded to 21 13 Kingston Street, Thy posted a video on Instagram. It was lighthearted. She was joking with Matthew about growing older. Her caption said that he believed they would grow old together, and she did not have the heart to correct him because she was Vietnamese, and simply was not going to age the same way. It was the kind of post that gets a laugh, gets shared into the regular rhythm of a feed within hours. Nobody who saw that video on April 24th had any reason to think it was the last public video of Thy and Matthew Mitchell together. The week continued without any visible sign of disruption. Thy remained active and engaged. She was still coordinating with colleagues. She was still keeping up with her board responsibilities. She was still moving forward on every front that people around her could see. Then came Thursday, May 1st. 3 days before the welfare check, Thy took her daughter Maya out for the afternoon. The purpose was specific. They were shopping for dresses for an upcoming family wedding. Thy's sister Mai was getting married in Boston, and the trip was already being planned. Thy posted about the outing on Instagram that same day. Maya picked her dress. Thy made sure she had hers sorted too. A mother and her 8-year-old daughter on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, planning for a family celebration still weeks away. That post went up 3 days before May 4th. People who saw it that Thursday had no idea it would be one of the last things Thy Mai ever posted publicly. Sunday, May 3rd is where the timeline becomes critical. That evening, Thy was on the phone with friends. People who spoke with her that night have described the conversation as completely normal. There was nothing in her tone, nothing in what she said, no sign of tension or concern. She was talking about upcoming plans. She was planning a future that had already been decided for her. She just did not know it yet. That same Sunday evening, Matthew was expected at a dinner with friends. He did not show up. That detail sits quietly inside the record. A missed dinner on the evening of May 3rd. No explanation given. No alarm raised by anyone who noticed. But think about what that missed dinner actually represents in the timeline of this case. Sunday night was the last point at which the outside world had any scheduled contact with Matthew Mitchell. He did not show, he did not call, he did not send a message. The people who were expecting him moved on with their evening and assumed an ordinary explanation. There was no way for them to know that the silence on the other end of that empty chair was not ordinary at all. At the time, it meant nothing. Looking back, it was the last night anyone outside that house had any contact with Matthew Mitchell. But Matthew was not at that dinner, and by Sunday night the babysitter had already begun trying to reach the family. Calls to the house, calls to Thy's phone, calls to Matthew's phone. Not one of them connected. The phones rang out and went nowhere. By Monday morning, May 4th, 2026, it had been more than 24 hours since anyone had successfully reached a single person in that household. The babysitter made a decision. She stopped calling and went directly to the school to collect Max and Maya herself. She arrived. She waited at the gate. She watched the doors open and the other children come out. Maya Mitchell and Maxwell Mitchell were not among them. They had never arrived at school that morning. The school had no record of either child being present that day. The babysitter contacted Thy's sister immediately. Mai had also been trying to reach Thy without success. At that point, 2 children completely unaccounted for, every phone in the household going unanswered since the previous night, and Matthew having missed his Sunday dinner without any word. Mai made the call that set everything in motion. She dialed 911. She requested a welfare check at the family's home on Kingston Street in River Oaks. Houston Police Department dispatched officers to 2113 Kingston Street at 5:26 p.m. on Monday, May 4th, 2026. The address sits in one of the most established and well-known neighborhoods in Houston. Properties on those streets carry significant value. The home at 2113 Kingston Street had 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and just under 4,000 square feet. It was valued at over $1 million. From the street, it looked exactly the way it always looked. Maintained, quiet. A house that gave no indication from the outside that anything inside it had changed. Officers approached the front of the property. They went inside. And from that moment forward, this case was no longer a welfare check. When Houston Police Department officers entered the home at 2113 Kingston Street on the evening of May 4, 2026, what they found inside prompted an immediate investigation that would be classified as one of the most significant cases in recent Houston history. Inside the home, officers located 4 individuals. All 4 were unresponsive. All 4 had sustained gunshot wounds. The 4 individuals were Matthew Mitchell, 52, his wife, Thy Mai Mitchell, 39, their daughter Maya Mitchell, 8 years old, and their son, Maxwell Mitchell, Max, 4 years old. Houston Fire Department personnel who responded confirmed that the 2 children were found in their beds. Houston Police Department released an official statement the following day, Tuesday, May 5, 2026. The statement read, "Evidence on scene indicated the incident was a murder-suicide in which the male shot the 3 victims and then shot himself." That was the official position of HPD, stated publicly, within 24 hours of officers entering that home. Matthew Fitchell was named the suspect. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, the official medical examiner's office for Harris County, conducted a full independent examination and released their confirmed findings shortly after. Matthew Mitchell's manner of death was officially ruled a suicide. Thy Mai Mitch, Maya Mitchell, and Maxwell Mitchell, all 3, were officially ruled homicides. The cause of death for all 4 individuals was confirmed as a gunshot wound to the head. Per the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, the official time of death, as recorded by the medical examiner, was 6:11 p.m. on Monday, May 4, 2026. Officers had been dispatched to the address at 5:26 p.m. That 45-minute difference between dispatch and the medical examiner's recorded time of death now sits permanently inside the official record of this case. HPD also confirmed in their official communications that there was no indication of any outside involvement. Investigators were not looking beyond the walls of that house for another person. The evidence at the scene pointed in one direction, and that direction did not extend outside the property. There was no note found at the scene. That has been confirmed. No written communication of any kind was recovered that offered an explanation, a stated motive, or any account of what led to the events of May 4th. The absence of a note is significant, not because it changes the official findings, but because it removes one of the few avenues that might have provided the people left behind with any kind of answer. Think about that for a moment. A man who had spent his entire adult life building things, businesses, careers, relationships, menus, brands, left nothing in writing, no explanation, no context, nothing. Investigators also reviewed the official records surrounding the Mitchell household and found nothing that would have flagged this address as one requiring prior attention. There had been no police calls to 2113 Kingston Street in the period leading up to May 4th. Not one response. Not one documented incident of any kind that had placed law enforcement at that address before the welfare check. A review of Harris County court records produced the same result. No filings, no restraining orders, no legal actions of any kind connected to either Matthew or Thy Mitchell. The paper trail that typically exists around a household with documented problems, the 911 logs, the court documents, the legal filings, none of it was present here. That is a detail worth holding on to. The absence of an official record does not mean the absence of private struggle. But what investigators had to work with was a household that, by every documented and verified measure, had shown no external indicators of what May 4th would bring. One additional piece of evidence entered the investigation from a direction that most public reporting did not cover. Following the discovery, the family confirmed that all interior security camera footage recorded inside the residence had been turned over to the Houston Police Department to assist in the investigation. The contents of that footage have not been made public. HPD has not released any information about what the cameras captured inside that home. As of the family's official statement in May 2026, that footage remains part of an active and ongoing investigation. Whatever those cameras recorded in the hours before officers arrived, that information currently exists only inside the HPD investigation. And that investigation has not finished its work. There was also one account that circulated in the days following May 4th, attributed to people described as close to the case, which said that Matthew had been experiencing episodes of paranoia in the days immediately before the incident. That account has never been confirmed by HPD. It has never been confirmed by the Mitchell family. No named medical professional has come forward publicly in connection with it. It remains one unverified claim with no official source behind it. Regarding the financial picture, Travelers Cart had secured a $2.35 million funding round, and Houston's restaurant industry had been navigating genuine economic pressures in the years leading into 2026. Some observers pointed to those pressures as potential context in the immediate aftermath of May 4th. Craig Howard, president of the Texas Restaurant Association's Houston chapter, addressed this directly and was clear. There was no indication from anyone within the professional community that financial pressure had played any role in what happened. The people who worked alongside Matthew and Thy in the months before May 4th saw nothing in how they operated that reflected that kind of strain. As of this documentary, the Houston Police Department has not released an official motive. HPD has not indicated publicly when or whether a motive will ever be confirmed. The investigation remains open. No charges will ever be filed. Matthew Mitchell is deceased, but the case has not been formally closed, and HPD has stated that work to understand the full circumstances surrounding May 4th, 2026 continues. What law enforcement has confirmed is a set of official findings backed by forensic evidence. What they have not been able to provide, and what the people who knew Thy Mai are still waiting for, is an answer to the one question the entire record leaves open. Why? That question has no official answer. And for the people who knew her, who worked beside her, who sat across from her at board meetings, and received messages from her the week she died, that is the part of this case that is not resolved, and may never fully resolve, regardless of what any investigation ultimately finds. But there is something else this investigation has not resolved. Something the family themselves had to step forward and correct. Because while law enforcement was doing its work, the media was doing something else entirely. And a significant amount of what was being reported about this case was not true. Before we continue, if this documentary is giving you the full picture of this case that you have not been able to find anywhere else, that is exactly what this channel is built to do. Lethal Obsessions covers cases like this one with the level of accuracy and depth that the people at the center of these stories deserve. Subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. What is coming next is the part of this case that most channels either got completely wrong or never covered at all. Stay with us. News of what happened at 2130 Kingston Street reached Houston's restaurant community within hours of HPD's Tuesday statement. And the response that followed said as much about who Thy Mai was as anything in her professional biography. Craig Howard, president of the Texas Restaurant Association's Greater Houston chapter, was among the first to speak. He did not describe a professional contact. He described someone his organization had specifically sought out. His words: "We saw such a bright star with Thy that we asked her to serve on our board. We knew she would inject some new ideas. It looked like this was a successful power couple doing this together." Howard also noted that in the week before May 4th, he had hosted approximately 50 restaurateurs at a social gathering held at Travelers Table. Thy was there. The restaurant was full. That evening took place days before officers responded to the same address for a welfare check. The same address. Days apart. Chef Jassi Bindra had been in active communication with Thy in the days before May 4th. The two were planning a collaboration dinner together. When he learned what had happened, he said, "She was so energetic. She loved the restaurant world. It's really shocking to hear what happened. All our support goes to her family and friends." Bindra was not describing someone who had gone quiet or pulled back. He was describing someone actively planning, actively engaged, actively building, right up to the point where everything stopped. And that is the detail every single one of these tribute voices shares without realizing it. Every person who spoke about Thy after May 4th described the same woman: present, forward-moving, planning. Not one described someone who seemed frightened or withdrawn. In a relationship homicide case, that consistency is not just a testament to who Thai was. It is a window into how completely the private reality of that household was separated from everything the outside world could see. Eric Sandler, city editor for Culture Map Houston, described Thai as deeply active in local philanthropy and a consistent mentor to others in the industry. His words: "She was never happier than when she was helping other people celebrate." Traveler's Table and Traveler's Cart had become a venue, particularly for birthday celebrations and big groups of friends. Emily Williams Knight, president and CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association, released an official statement. She said, "To say that Thai will be missed is an understatement. She was selected by her peers to represent the chapter as Greater Houston. Restaurateur of the Year for 2025. We will remember Thai as a ray of light who inspired everyone around her." In moments like this, we are reminded that our industry is more than workplaces. It is a community. On the morning of May 6th, less than 48 hours after officers entered that home, the staff of Traveler's Table and Traveler's Cart showed up and opened the doors. Ryan Brown, the longtime director of operations for Travelers Collective, stepped forward to lead both locations. The restaurants released a statement that read, "Hospitality comes from within, and to honor the Traveler's legacy, we will continue to welcome you into our restaurants." Thai's sister Lai Mai posted on Facebook, "We are heartbroken to share that my sister, Thai, and her beloved children, Maya and Max, passed away last night. Our family is grieving deeply and asks for privacy during this incredibly difficult time." She did not mention Matthew. She did not reference the circumstances. She named Thai, she named Maya, she named Max. The community response built a clear picture of a woman whose reach was wider than most people outside that world had understood. Thy Mai had not just run 2 restaurants, she had become a connector. Someone whose presence changed what was possible in any room she walked into. The fact that her staff showed up, that the doors stayed open, that the lights stayed on, that was not a business decision. That was a statement about who she was. But while the community was responding, a version of this story was spreading across news outlets and social media that contained details the family would later be forced to correct. Directly, details that were never confirmed, details that were never true. Tuesday, May 20th, 2026, 16 days after May 4th, the Mitchell family released their first and only official public statement. It was not a general expression of grief. It was a point-by-point correction of what had been reported, and several things the public had been told wrong. The first correction was the name. The family stated clearly that she should be remembered as Thy Mai, her maiden name, not Thy Mitchell. That request came from the people who raised her and watched her build everything she built. That is the name this documentary has used throughout, because it is what her family asked for. The second correction was more significant. Multiple news organizations had reported that Thai was pregnant at the time of her death. That claim was false. The family confirmed it. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences autopsy report contained no such finding. No law enforcement official ever made that statement. The claim originated from unverified early reporting and spread without confirmation until it became, for many people, an assumed fact. It was not a fact. If you watched another video on this case that presented the pregnancy claim as true, now you know the record. The statement also confirmed there was no history of domestic violence in the household, stated directly and without qualification. The exact trigger for the welfare check was also clarified. The babysitter went to school on Monday morning to collect Max and Maya. The children had never arrived. The school had no record of either child being present. That was the moment the alarm was raised. Not a missed call. Not an unanswered text. 2 children who had never made it to school. The statement confirmed no family member entered the home before law enforcement. All interior security camera footage had been turned over to HBD. The family cooperated immediately and fully. On the businesses, Traveler's Table and Traveler's Cart would remain open. Foreign fare was temporarily paused and would resume at a later date in Thai's honor. The statement also announced 2 things that had not been reported anywhere. The Thy Mai Foundation, established in honor of Thai, Maya, and Max. Live at ThyMaiFoundation.org and the Thy Mai, Maya, and Max Memorial Hospitality Scholarship, established jointly by the Texas Restaurant Foundation and the Greater Houston chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association. Built to support Texas students pursuing culinary arts, restaurant and hospitality management, food service operations, and hospitality leadership. Emily Williams Knight described it directly. "I defined what it means to truly care for people. She led with generosity, lifted others up, and made everyone feel seen and valued. This scholarship is a way to carry that spirit forward." The family closed with 3 requests: privacy, compassion, and accuracy. That request is the reason this chapter exists. The story of Thy Mai deserves to be told correctly. Not the version that traveled fastest, the version that is true. And there is still one part of that truth that no official statement, no forensic record, and no correction can resolve. Part that sits at the center of this case and refuses to close. There is a question that sits underneath every confirmed fact in this case, underneath the official findings, underneath the forensic record, underneath every tribute posted by the community that loved Thy Mai. The question is not who did it. That has been confirmed. The question is, how? Not how in the forensic sense, how in the human sense. How does a man who built a life that visible, that celebrated, publicly documented, a man who traveled the world, raised 2 children, ran 2 restaurants, stood next to Guy Fieri on national television, and was actively planning a World Cup menu with colleagues, how does that man become the person law enforcement named as the suspect on May 5th, 2026? That question has no official answer, and it may never have one. HPD has not released a motive. No official explanation has been made public. The investigation remains open. In cases where the individual responsible is deceased, there is no arrest, no trial, process that forces the full picture into the open. Whatever investigators have found has not been shared. There was also no note. HPD confirmed this. Matthew Mitchell, a man who wrote journalism across 3 international cities, named every cocktail on both restaurant menus, who had spent his entire adult life putting words to things, left nothing in writing that explained any of it. Whatever he was carrying in the days before May 4th, he kept it entirely to himself. That is not just an investigative gap. It speaks directly to the pattern that runs through relationship homicide cases. The capacity of one person inside a relationship to contain something completely, to keep it below the surface while the external life continues forward without a single visible crack. There was one unverified account, never confirmed by HPD, never confirmed by the family, that Matthew had been experiencing episodes of paranoia in the days before May 4th. No official source has ever backed that claim. It is included here because it has been widely reported. Because, if it has any truth to it at all, it raises a question harder to sit with than the paranoia itself. Did I know something was wrong? The public record cannot answer that. What it shows is a woman on the phone with friends Sunday night with no sign of distress. A woman who took her daughter dress shopping 3 days earlier. A woman her entire professional community described as fully present and actively, building right up to the end. But the public record also shows a household with no prior police calls, no court filings, no documented incidents of any kind. Researchers and investigators who study relationship homicide have noted consistently that the absence of documentation is not the same as the absence of struggle. The most dangerous situations are frequently the ones that produce the least official record because the relationship contains them, and because the person experiencing the danger is often the last one to name it, even privately. That is not a statement about Thy Mai specifically, is what this pattern always reveals, that the external presentation of a relationship and its internal reality can exist in completely separate worlds, with neither one visible from the other side. A relationship is the most private structure 2 people can build. What happens inside it, what is said, what is withheld, what accumulates beneath the surface of a life that looks whole from the outside, is not always visible to the people living it, and it is almost never visible to anyone else. Thy Mai was 39 years old. She was building a future. She had plans for the week ahead, the months ahead. For a wedding in Boston her daughter had already picked a dress for. Whatever was happening inside that house, whatever the record did not capture and the note never explained, it ended a life that had every reason to continue. That is what relationship homicide cases leave behind. Not just grief, not just unanswered questions, but the permanent reminder that the people we think we know most completely are sometimes the people we know least. On the morning of Wednesday, May 6th, 2026, the doors of Traveler's Table and Traveler's Cart opened for business. The owners were gone. The family was in grief, and yet the staff showed up. They unlocked the doors, set the tables, and served the community. Ryan Brown, the longtime director of operations for Travelers Collective, stepped in to lead both locations. That decision, to open, to stay open, keep serving, was not obligation. It was commitment to something Thy Mai had spent years building. That is where her legacy begins. Not with a foundation, not with an award. With the people she built around her choosing on the most difficult morning they had faced. Show up anyway. Thy Mai was born in Chicago, raised in Houston, a first-generation Vietnamese American who started as a food runner in her family. Restaurant at 12 and ended as the 2025 Greater Houston Restaurateur of the Year. Everything between those 2 points was the result of deliberate decisions made by a woman who never stopped building. She designed a clothing line because her luggage did not arrive on enough trips, and she decided to solve the problem herself. The jet-setter jacket, flight jumpsuit, the wrap-me-up dress, the hideaway hoodie, the tour tee, each piece named for a type of movement, each one a direct reflection of the person who created them. Foreign fare is temporarily paused. The family has confirmed it will return. Thy Mai Foundation has been established in her honor and in honor of Maya and Max. Live at ThyMaiFoundation.org. The Thy Mai, Maya and Max Memorial Hospitality Scholarship, established by the Texas Restaurant Foundation and the Greater Houston chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association, will support Texas students pursuing culinary arts, restaurant and hospitality management, food service operations, and hospitality leadership. Emily Williams Knight said, "Thy defined what it means to truly care for people. She led with generosity, lifted others up, and made everyone feel seen and valued. This scholarship is a way to carry that spirit forward. She will be present in that industry long after the news cycle has moved on. Not as a memory, but as a name on a document that opens a door for someone who needed it opened." The family asked for accuracy. This documentary has tried to honor that. 10 days before May 4th, Thy posted a video joking about growing old with Matthew. She was relaxed. She was laughing. 3 days before May 4th, she took Maya shopping for a family wedding in Boston. Maya picked her dress. Thy made sure she had hers too. That is the last public record of Thy Mai in her own words. Planning for the people she loved. Moving towards something ahead of her with no reason to believe the week would end any differently than the ones before it. The Instagram post is still there. The video is still there. A woman in her own words, in her own life, present, 10 days before everything changed. Her name is Thy Mai, born in Chicago, raised in Houston, built something real, brought people in, showed up. For her industry, for her board, for her community, for her children, and for every person who ever sat at one of her tables and felt, without being able to explain it, that the place they were sitting in had been built with intention. People she built that team around are still showing up. The doors are still open. Say her name correctly. If this documentary gave you the full, accurate picture of this case that you could not find anywhere else, that is what Lethal Obsession is built for. Every case on this channel is researched to this standard. Every person at the center of these stories is treated with this level of accuracy. If that matters to you, subscribe right now. Turn on your notifications, because the next case is already being built, and you do not want to come in halfway through. Share this documentary with someone who needs to hear this story told correctly. And if you have made it this far, thank you for staying. Thy Mai deserved a full account. Now you have one.